Welcome to Tamina Talks Immigration. I'm Tamina Watson, immigration attorney at Watson Immigration Law and the author of the book series, The Startup Visa. As we charge into 2025, we're facing dynamic obstacles and groundbreaking shifts in immigration law and policy. And I'm here to break it all down for you, from must-know practical tips and smart strategies to the latest legal challenges that affect us as individuals, businesses, and communities. Join me as I connect with inspiring immigrants, trailblazing entrepreneurs, passionate activists, and influential policymakers to uncover the challenges and celebrate the triumphs shaping our world. Whether you're an immigrant, an aspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about how laws weave into the fabric of our society, you're in the perfect spot for energetic and engaging discussions. I know many of you are on the go, juggling your day while tuning in, and I truly appreciate you letting me share these moments with you. Let's dive in to the world of immigration. Welcome, everyone. This is Tamina at Tamina Talks Immigration. I am so honored to bring you an incredible, inspiring human who I am lucky to call a friend. Her name is Amanda DuBois. She is the founder and managing partner of DuBois Levias Law Group, a woman-owned boutique family law firm in Seattle. Before practicing law, she was a high-risk labor and delivery nurse at the University of Washington Medical Center, a background that informs her legal work and fuels her passion for social justice. Over the past 30 years, DuBois has represented thousands of clients in divorce and medical practice cases, arguing hundreds of motions and taken multiple cases to trial. She's also the creator of the Camille Delaney Mystery Series, drawing on her dual expertise in medicine and law to spotlight inequities and injustices within both the systems. Her first two titles, The Complication and Deliver from the Evil, received numerous awards, including the 2023 International Book Award for Mystery and Suspense. In addition, she is the founder of the Civil Survival Project, which helps formerly incarcerated individuals reintegrate. She also established the Full Circle Scholarship at Seattle University School of Law and currently serves on the boards of Purpose, Dignity, Action, and Freedom Education Project in Puget Sound. She received the Sally P. Savage Leadership in Philanthropy Award from Washington State Bar Association, and her latest work, Unshackled, releases in February 2025. And I can assure you that's not everything about her, but that's what we're going to leave you with today. And go read her bio on LinkedIn and her website. Amanda, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. This is so much fun. We've been friends for so long, and it's so fun to see what you really do and see your podcast room. That's my favorite part so far.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, honestly, you have been such an inspiration to me for so many years that I'm grateful that we can actually have an on-air discussion, because a lot of our discussions that happen frequently are behind text messages and phone calls. So now we're giving a little bit of a visibility to people that don't would like to be a fly on the wall, really. So, well, where do we even begin? Because there's so much to talk about, but let's start with the law practice, because
Okay.
you were a nurse before and somehow law came into your life. How did that happen, and how did you start your own law firm?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is kind of a funny story. I was a nurse and I wanted to get out of nursing because I wanted to find a job that I would have more autonomy in. And so I decided to go back to school and decided to become a doctor. So I took all those crazy hard pre-med classes, biochemistry and organic chemistry, and I took like a couple of years doing it. I just didn't like it. And so I thought, well, now what am I going to do? So I thought maybe I'll go get an MBA. So I went to the University of Washington bookstore and I went to buy it's called the GMAT book, or I can't remember. It's one of those tests that you take to get into MBA school. So I went to buy that book so I could study up on it. And it was the GMAT book and the GRE book, which is graduate school, and the LSAT, which is law school, and the MCAT, which is medical school. And I thought, and I knew I didn't want to go to medical school, but I thought, well, maybe I should get the law school book and the business book. And so I took them both home and I sat on my deck, and it was a beautiful June day in Seattle. And I started studying the GMAT book, and it was calculus and physics and all this boring stuff. And I thought, this is horrible. So I got out the LSAT book and I started answering the questions, and they came very easy to me. And my husband came home from work and I said, I think I'm going to go to law school. And he's like, why would you go to law school? We don't even know any lawyers. And I'm like, well, I've got both of these books and I'm not very good at this one. And I'm really good at this one. So the universe must be giving me a message. That's literally how I ended up in law school.
I love it. And he's like, I just went to work this morning. What happened?
So, so I thought, okay, I'll give law school. Anyway, I ended up in law school, and it was like I felt like a stranger in a strange land because I'm here, I'm a nurse. All my background's in biology and science. And I'm in law school with all these like, like poli-sci majors and they were younger than me. And I felt like completely I didn't belong there, but I stuck with it and made it through, and here I am.
I love it. You know, when I went to law school in the United Kingdom, there were a lot of people who were taking law as a second career. And there was one particular woman who used to be a nurse, now that I think of it. But what I wanted to say is in the UK, the legal system is different. The education system is different. So you go to law school and you have to pass law school, all the exams. But you don't become a lawyer immediately. After you pass the exams, then you have to do an apprenticeship. And when you finish the apprenticeship, only then do you get the license to practice law. But the apprenticeship is so competitive because the opportunities are limited, and the demand by students is greater. It's 10 to 1, if not more than that.
Oh
And
gosh.
when I didn't understand this in the past, because I thought I checked all the boxes, I just came straight from university. But those who were looking at law as a second career were all snapped up because they had the life experiences, they had, experience in whatever field they were, like nursing, to be able to understand medical malpractice. And so it was an interesting, at the time, I was resentful of that. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing out on competition from all these people who are older than me. But now I'm like, wow, I so understand that, because your first career informs you in how you can be so much better at your second career if it's
Well,
aligned.
that's the perfect segue into my law firm, because you had asked earlier how I decided to start a law firm. And what happened is I came out of law school, and is exactly what you said. Like, when you come out of law school, you don't know how to be a lawyer. You know how to learn to be a lawyer, but you don't know anything practical. But because I came out of a medical model where people came out of medical school and they became a resident, and then they were, in training under trained doctors, I thought, well, why don't we do that in the law business? But we don't here. I guess they do in the UK, but they don't. So I decided, after I came out of law school, I got a job with some middle-aged white guys who were really nice to me for several years until they weren't. When I got smarter than them, they didn't like me anymore. So I started my own law firm, and I decided that I made a really affirmative decision that the way it was going to work was I was looking for people that had life experience, and I wanted them to train for a year with me so that I could train them up to be the kind of lawyer that I thought, they would want to be. And in family law, you really want to find people that have life experience, because you're dealing with people in so much crisis. And if you take like a 26-year-old who just came out of law school and ask them to counsel a 65-year-old woman whose husband just left her and she's looking at retirement, like, it's really hard for a young kid who's right out of law school to understand, there can be compassionate, but they can't give any life experience. And so all of our lawyers mostly have come from some sort of human services background, or sometimes some of them come from a financial background. But I seek out lawyers who have some life experience for that very reason. And so I think the UK was onto something, and the US doesn't do that.
That's amazing. And listeners should understand, or viewers should know, that Amanda's firm is one of the most recognizable law firms, and it's been voted as one of the best places to work at for a number of years because of this outlook. And now I'm understanding why. So much to learn
And
from.
you know what else? I just realized the other day we were doing this. This is going to be my 30th year as a woman-owned law firm in Seattle.
That's
And I think
incredible.
there aren't very many others of us that started a law firm for women, completely women-owned, for the past 30 years. So I'm curious to know I'm sure there are some other people, but I think we're in a small minority of,
For sure.
standing there for 30 years is a long time in the law
That
business.
is. And, I mean, running a law firm is not easy. And to do that for 30 years, I mean, what an incredible achievement to, celebrate the 30 years. I hope you have a big splash. And, your team truly is amazing. And so your team, I have worked with a number of them actually. And so for listeners and viewers, the reason that Amanda and I have worked so much, particularly with her team members, is because there's a huge intersection with family law and immigration. And the way I see it is when a client, and it could be a number of ways, and the two separate scenarios I'll share is that number one, often when people are coming to the US on an H-1B or some other work visa, they have a spouse who often is not allowed to work. They're a dependent. They're on a dependent visa. More often than not, they're on an H-4 visa. And if they get divorced, then they cannot be in the United States. But they may have had US born children. They can't leave. They want to be with their families. That's one scenario. Another scenario that comes in mind is that it takes a long time to get a green card. So you might need to be in that visa scenario for a while, waiting out the green card. But during that waiting out period, divorces can happen, all sorts of things can happen. And so in these types of contexts, I've worked with you and your team a lot. And it's just been such an amazing experience for me because I don't know anything about family law. I become just a tool to the work that you do. How does it come up for you? How have you seen it? How's your team seen it?
Pretty much the same thing. So here's what I would say is the sign of a really good lawyer or maybe any professional is being able to say you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody comes into our office and especially in Seattle, because there's so much, like Microsoft has offices in Bangalore and so we're accustomed to people coming from India and there's, people coming from all over Asia. And that's a problem because they're coming and going and they're getting married here and there and they're having kids. And so some of the questions that we need to ask right at the beginning of representation is what's their status? Like where are you a citizen? Do you have a green card? Now, I don't pretend to know what all that means, but I know the questions to ask and I know when to pick up the phone and call you. So I think that's the key to really good. It's probably true. It's true of doctors too. Like if you go to your regular doctor and you've got a lump someplace, you want them to send you to a specialist. So part of being a family lawyer is knowing when to triage something and knowing when you need to get Tamina on board. And so and you see it's the same thing. Like we have a mother who comes in whose husband is, on a, H-1B visa and she's the spouse and usually sometimes people can be really mean. It's like, well, then she's just going to get kicked out of the country. And you're like, well, are you sure you really want to do that? Because then your child's probably going to go move to someplace far away. And so it's a lot of strategy. And what's really important or what's the best way of proceeding is if you can get opposing counsel who wants to work with you to help keep it. Like if I represent the mother who doesn't have the status, it's part of it's and the father might be saying, well, I'm done with her and she can just go back. And you're like, you better think about that because that means your child's probably going to go back. And so we should be working together and you know way more about that, to try to preserve her status in some way so that, then that's when we hand that whole issue over to you.
Yeah, and it's been a real pleasure working with you and your team on these cases because they're so stressful. They're
because the stakes are so high.
Yeah, the stakes are so high. But knowing that you have competent, compassionate lawyers who are actually looking at the highest good of everyone for the best solution for everyone gives comfort to everybody in the broader team to be able to come to the right solution for the client. And it's not been one case, it's been all different types of cases that we've worked on. So for listeners who are thinking about, if I go through a divorce, because oftentimes people are just biding their time, like I'm just gonna suffer through this because my child there's no real reason to suffer if you can find the right professional help to get you to a point where you're in a safe place and your status is safe.
But the big caveat, not but, and that's a decision that should be made super carefully. So what I would say you don't want to do is say, oh, I can just leave and we'll figure this all out later. A lot of times there's a whole bunch of strategy that happens before. If you're the person that doesn't have the status, you would want to seek legal counsel long before you're so fed up that you have to walk out the door, just because, you know, you want to make sure you understand all your options, and a lot of strategy goes into that. So you're
Totally.
exactly right, but you get legal advice with a family law lawyer and an immigration lawyer who are accustomed to working together to help make that decision prior to taking any legal action or moving out of the house, or, you know, taking your child. Like, I've had people who've taken their child back to India and then they think they're going to file for divorce there, but then we've got the Hague Convention, which means you can't necessarily force a kid to come back. And so there's a lot of sticky legal thorny issues that have to be addressed.
Totally. So, I mean, kids don't leave the house until you have all of this information. But also, it's sometimes it's evidential. You can't get the evidence anymore unless you're in the house. Often people will need to prove that they were, you know, legally married and did all the boring things that married people do, like pay
Right, yeah.
bills and pay taxes. And you know, if you've left the house and you don't have access to those, then we don't have any of that. But I do want to talk about detention, because what you have done so effortlessly is you've really taken one part of your career, married it to another, to another, to another, and you've really addressed a lot of these things in such beautiful ways, and they're complicated. So let's talk about detention. Immigration detention happens for women, but let's talk about detention in general, because your latest book, for anybody who is interested in criminal justice reform, criminal sentencing reform, you know, reintegration of convicted people into society, women in general who want empowerment, all these people should actually take note of your latest book, which is called Unshackled. And I actually have a copy of it right here, because this is where detention, women, empowerment, immigration all come together. So can you talk a little bit about why you covered detention in your book, and how do you see it in your practice, and how does it dovetail into immigration?
Big lot of questions. So in depositions, we'd say objection, compound question. So
I love
that's a lot. But I would add one thing, you know, when you talk about what this book is about, it's at the basis, it's really a lot about community safety. Because some people think, well, I'm not really interested in people in prison, and I don't really care about, you know, criminal law, but you do want to live in a safe community. And what I've learned happens is, when I started an organization called Civil Survival, and it's an organization that helps people coming out of prison. And I was a privileged white lady, well, I still am, you know, who had owned a law firm and was living a pretty comfortable life, and I still do. But I ended up getting to know a bunch of people who had been in prison, and one thing led to another, and I started an organization that helps them after they get out of prison. And so I started meeting a lot of friends who are women who were mothers when they were incarcerated. And I hadn't really thought about that before. I was kind of embarrassed to say this, but I never really thought about what happens to the children when a mother goes to prison. And because I'm a family law lawyer, and I think honestly, because I was a labor and delivery nurse, that there's some consistency there about caring about moms and kids. And so I really started to explore that. And what I learned is that those children, when a mother goes to prison, well, first, when a father goes to prison, usually they go to prison and the child stays with the mother, and the child has a consistent primary care provider. And as sad as it is for them to lose their father for some period of time, they usually stay in a stable mother-child relationship with their mother. When a mother goes to prison, it's not common that the child stays with the father. Those children oftentimes end up in the system. They end up in foster care. They end up in, you know, living with a relative who may or may not really want them. So those children become at huge risk in our society to, you know, go down the wrong path and end up, you know, making some bad choices and making our communities less safe. So I started thinking a lot about like, why are we, then I started learning about why mothers go to prison. And most of the mothers that are in prison are there because they have some kind of childhood trauma and they were psychologically unstable because of that. And most of them at some point ended up, getting on drugs because if you or I had a bad childhood, we would probably go to a therapist and we would probably go to a psychiatrist and we'd probably get subscribed some sort of drug, I know it's not Valium anymore, but some kind of a drug. And we, be in therapy and be on some sort of antidepressant medication. Well, there's a whole demographic of society that has really bad trauma because they've had a really hard childhood, or they've been abused, or they've been raped, or they've been victims of domestic violence, but they don't necessarily have the resources to go to a therapist and get on antidepressants. So this particular cohort of people, they might get on meth, not because they're looking for some sort of calmness, but just they're in a part of society that they might get involved in illegal drugs. And for the first time, they feel like, oh, I feel so much better. So that treats their trauma. But then if you're on an illegal drug, as opposed to a benzo, then you have to try to find a way to afford it. And then you get down the slippery slope where you're doing property crimes, and then you usually get a boyfriend, and the boyfriend is sending you off to, do a property crime so you end up in this, it's sort of bad social behavior. But it doesn't come from like they woke up one morning and decided they wanted to rob somebody's car. It won't happen because they're a traumatized person who ended up on illegal drugs, made them feel better, and then they go and do antisocial behavior. So it just struck me that putting those women into a cage, basically, and treating them and humiliating them and taking them away from their children just doesn't seem like a very sensible or logical way to treat people who have been through that kind of trauma in their lives. So that's what kind of got me going. And then I thought, well, people should really know about this, but I thought, oh, I'll write an article about it. And I'm like, nobody's going to read an article about that. But because I write novels and I write mystery books, and I have this protagonist named Camille Delaney, I thought, well, that's it. Camille Delaney has to go to prison. And not go to prison, but go into the prison to represent some of these mothers. So the whole purpose of the book is it's a great fun mystery with a missing baby and all the twists and turns that go along with the mystery. But the underlying part of it is really ask a lot of questions about why are we doing this to moms, and how is that making our community, like, are they really dangerous to our community? No. But when you take a mom from a child, does that child become possibly dangerous to our community? That's the problem. And so I think that's what I hope that people take away from the book.
That's truly incredible and so deep, because it's so true. Whether you're a mom or a dad or any human, your childhood trauma does affect how you end up living. And if you do not have resources or even the awareness that you need help, sometimes you might have resources and not have the awareness.
Exactly.
And so they can both end up in the same place. And so but you're right, it's the next generation and the kids that and this argument can, you and I talked about ripple effect. There's a ripple effect to everything. And just so listeners know that Amanda has this amazing YouTube show called Ripple Haven. You should check it out, because she is not only brilliant herself, she has a lot of brilliant friends that she has interviewed on these various topics. And so the ripple effect of that is often unseen until it's felt in society. And I'm so glad you're touching on that. So while we're on the book, where can people find it? When is it coming out?
February 4th, pretty soon. It'll be Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, local bookstores, any place you would normally get a book. I'm super excited because I have a lot of, I want this book to get into the hands of policymakers and people that are going to be decision makers and that are going to have, some power over the system. So I'm working hard to get into law schools and I just got a phone call from some professors at Seattle University in criminal justice, and they want to start a book club with students. And then I said, well, how about we get some formerly incarcerated moms to come be part of the book club so that they can start to really build relationships and understand what's going. So I feel like, if you don't think that criminal, prison affects you, you want to hear statistics?
Yeah.
1 out of 4 people in our country has a criminal record that impacts their ability to get jobs and housing. There's
Mm.
almost 100 million people that have some kind of a criminal record. And of those people who end up in prison, which isn't not that many, but they're all going to come home and they're all going to live in your neighborhood and they're all going to be part of our community. And so to try to other that group of people and not to care for their children and not to try everything you can do to get those moms reconnected with their kids, because those kids, like, here's something to think about. And this is one of my women told me this is like, imagine a little girl and she's at school and she comes home from school and she comes to her apartment after school and her mom's not there because her mom got arrested that afternoon for selling meth or something. She was a pretty good mom. She wasn't the perfect mom, but she was a good mom to that little girl. But the mom got arrested. So the little girl's sitting outside the apartment door, wondering where her mom is. And it comes nighttime, and one of the neighbors is like, why is that little girl sitting on the outside the apartment crying? They call the police. The police come pick up the kid. The kid ends up going into foster home. The mother can't make bail because we don't make it easy for anybody to get on bail anymore. So the mother's over here on bail. The kid's over here in foster care. And what does the kid think? What did I do? Why did my mom abandon me? I must have done something. I must be a bad kid. I must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where it's left. That's where that child is left. And then the mother maybe never did make bail and ends up getting convicted and going to prison. And now you've got this kid who doesn't know and there's nobody is making that connection. Like I think they're starting to do a little bit now. It depends on your jurisdiction, but like if a police arrests somebody, you should ask them, do you have a kid? And then maybe make it so that they can see their child. Like we can't just silo children over here and parents over here and, arrest a mom because that child is now going to be damaged for life, right? Because somewhere somebody's going to say your mom's in prison or she's in jail, but there was never a chance to say goodbye necessarily, or there was never a way. And then that child might not be able to go to prison because we put prisons, way far away from our communities. So it's not that easy for a kid to get an opportunity to go see them. Anyway, the whole system is not set up necessarily to, keep moms and kids connected when the mom has ended up in prison.
It's so difficult to hear that as a mother, and I think when the Muslim ban happened and the children were separated from their parents during the last administration, I think it really touched a chord with mothers in particular, because we were seeing that right on the news, every feed that you had, and it really touched viscerally how we felt about life in general. And I think what you've just described is not something that is necessarily in your face all the time. And therefore, you're not necessarily able to see and feel that hardship and trauma that that child is facing. But if there was a way to see it, and your book is obviously trying to do that, I think you get the mothers to champion some policy changes. I mean, I'm almost brainstorming with you about who are your policy champions.
That's the point. That's why the book, that's the point, is to get this book. I mean, I'm getting to a point in my career where I don't necessarily want to be down in Olympia trying to change laws, but people need to start thinking. And there's some really cool, strong policy people that are changing laws for women, but this whole cohort of mothers in prison is a forgotten group. Like it's the last people who even thinks about it. I never did. And
Yeah,
when you say that, and you say, that they're not on anybody's radar, who's on people's radar? People who grow up in that system who end up committing crimes.
yeah,
So if you want to work on the crime situation, you have to I was, because I was a nurse, I was sort of in public health, and they always say go upstream from the problem. Like what causes that problem? And going upstream from the problem about crime, a lot of that is children who have been taken away from their parents they say, oh, this family, they all go to prison. And I'm like it's some genetic problem. It's like, it's not genetic. It's that you tear apart families. And guess what? That kid's going to possibly or likely grow up and get involved in the criminal legal system because we haven't provided them a strong childhood. And just because their mother or their father, made a mistake doesn't mean that we should abandon those kids. And that's the thing. Like, we all know there's a crime problem, but we don't think about why are those people committing crimes.
I totally agree. I totally agree. It's and when you throw in immigration in that, in that kind of thing, it's even worse. I mean, if you remember, I mean, the children were actually taken away from their parents, and there was, to be honest, I don't even know if all the children have been reunited with their parents at this point. Yeah, it's pretty tragic, and of course we're going into another era of that. And to be honest, immigration lawyers we're just bracing ourselves because we don't even know what to prepare for. I recently held training for the King County Bar Association, where immigration lawyers held a CLE for non-immigration lawyers, and we can sort of anticipate that these 10 things might happen. But to train the lawyers, you need specific things to train on, and we really don't know where we're going with that. But it's quite possible children will be separated again. And it kept me up for nights when that was happening. My children were 4 and 5, and I think if you remember, there was an outpouring of lawyer moms just really going.
Well, you were leading that. You were leading the way out there when that whole Muslim ban. You were at the airport probably in 15 minutes with all your immigration friends.
It was nuts. Yeah, it still gives me goosebumps, and it was 8 years ago. But here we are. I am focusing on joy. I think one thing that I would love for people to take away from this is chaos is part of our lives. It's the degree of chaos that you have to anticipate. I mean, I'm sending prayers to people in California. I mean, nobody wanted to wake up and see what's happening in Los Angeles at the moment. And there's no way in which you can prepare for something like that. But in our day-to-day lives, there are degrees of chaos. How, have you missed picking up your child from school? Have you missed that deadline? Are you working at the office at midnight? Do you have a client who's stressing you out? I do think there's an important place for joy in life, and it's something that you have to cultivate because it's the practice. You have to practice it, you have to find it, and then you have to chase it. I think, I would love for people to just keep that as a North Star, that while you're navigating the challenges of life, no matter what 2025 throws at you, find the things that bring you some sort of inner peace, because that's going to be the way we fuel ourselves in the next.
Got a book about that now too, which I haven't read, but I'm super excited to.
Oh yeah, I'm so excited. It's actually a journal. I'm writing a book, but this is a journal, and it's called Finding Joy, and it's
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. But coming back to you, I want listeners to really, I'm sure people are in awe of you. And it's almost like if I had to draw a diagram about the life of Amanda DuBois, it would be so that the through line is this incredible soul, and everything has a moment where it sort of transitions into something else, but what happened before comes with it. So your medical life really did transition into your law life, which has transitioned to your, philanthropic life, which, you have had one of the highest awards in Washington State for that, which then dovetailed into writing books where all of this experience is coming in together. What younger lawyers are probably thinking about is, how did you do it? And how do you do it all?
Well, I'm at this point in my life now, I think about this a lot, where things are starting to happen that are, and I kind of liken it to like having dropped acorns all along the road as I've gone through life. And now I'm looking back and seeing the trees. So I think the one thing I would say is you don't really know necessarily. I'm a really strong believer. I'm a big meditator and I'm a big metaphysics person. And I believe strongly that you can create things in your life, and you can, you are in charge of making your life what you want it to be. But I also know that you don't always necessarily know the best way for that to happen. So for example, if you want a certain thing, like I wanted to run a law firm, or I wanted to, I want my law firm to be successful. I don't know what that's necessarily going to look like. I have an idea what I want it to look like, but I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there. So I think the one thing that I've learned is because you don't know how you're going to get someplace or get a goal that you want. So, for example, if you want to own a law firm, for example, and things feel like they're not going right, and somebody left, or you got, you lost your best employer or something. The thing I've learned to tell myself is I didn't think this is what it was going to look like on the way to becoming a law firm owner, but I guess this is what it looks like. So you never drop that North Star. You never say, now I can't do it. It's just like, this isn't how I thought I was going to get here. So, and so like when I look back now and I look like these books I'm writing, they come out of life experience. And when I'm in the middle of the life experience, I don't know really how where that fits into the whole picture. But now I'm looking back and I'll meet someone, or like I just got reconnected with a friend I hadn't, been in touch with for 10 years. And she's like, oh, I'm going to get your book in front of all the judges and, and make sure it gets, all these different places. And I've been thinking a lot about, I want it to get to the judges, but I don't think about, I'm going to call A, B, and C, and D and get them in front of the judges. I'm more like, this needs to get in front of judges. And then all of a sudden pops up these people from different parts of my life that start helping me to make something come real. So I think people get discouraged when they think it doesn't look like they thought it was going to look like. And so then they just give up and say, this isn't working, because it is working. If you've got a really strong goal and you want to get somewhere, you're going to get there. But when you're in the middle of chaos and it looked like you're talking about, like you've got mean clients and things aren't going well, you just have to tell yourself, this is exactly how it looks to get to where it is that I'm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then how have you managed that with you are, congratulations, a grandmother, along this pathway. So a lot of women, I mean, when I was a young lawyer, I used to think about, I just want to follow the best women lawyers. And then I became a mother. I'm like, I want to follow the best women lawyers who have children. And then now it's like, I want to follow the women who have amazing children, who have amazing careers. You're progressing in how you do that. You have it seems effortless, although I'm sure it wasn't. Younger women lawyers will often think about, or not just lawyer, any women professional would be wondering, how did you juggle that? What was the balance looking like? Indra Nooyi, the PepsiCo CEO, has a famous clip about, you have a totem pole and your husband is like at the bottom of it, and her secretary used to answer the questions for the children. There was like 5 questions. Have you done your homework? Have you done, 1, 2, 3? Okay, now you can have your iPad, and then report back to Indra saying, oh yeah, your child called. I went through the questions. Now she's got her iPad or whatever. There's a degree of balance to bring in, and your village that you rely on. How did you do that to get to this point where women are like in awe of you, thinking, what's your secret?
I appreciate that. I don't think anybody's in awe of anything, but I probably wasn't the best mother in the world, honestly. I mean, my kids have turned out great and I adore them, but I wasn't the mom who made the cookies and drove on the field trip. And I never even tried to do that because I knew it wasn't really what I wasn't going to probably happen. So I did my best with my kids, but I think you just have to don't have over expectations for yourself. Like if you can't make first of all, I adopted my kids when they were 4 and 7. And they came from Korea and they didn't speak English. So I came into motherhood in a kind of a backwards way where all of a sudden I had 2 kids in elementary school, or not, in preschool around there. And I didn't know anything. And the mothers were not super nice to me because I was the working mom and they were all the stay-at-home moms where we lived, because my husband was or is a doctor. And so we lived in this like little community of a lot of stay-at-home moms. And so I had a lot of not fans. Like the mothers weren't super nice then. This was like back in the, I don't know, mid 80s or something. And so there wasn't a lot of support for the way that I was doing it. And I'll tell you one thing, I didn't know anybody. There were no role models. I didn't ever know a working mom. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. There were no women law firm owners that I knew of back when I was getting started. So it was a lot of, figuring it out as I went. But my kids kind of knew that I was doing that. And I remember one time my one daughter came home. They spent a lot of time at the local neighborhood swimming pool because they're on the swim team and stuff. And Maddie came home one day and said, I won't say her name, Mrs. Jones was talking about you at the swimming pool today. And I'm like, oh, what was she saying? And she said, she was telling Mrs. Smith that we weren't going to turn out. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said we weren't going to turn out because you were never here.
Huh.
And she looked at me and she goes, I'm going to turn out, Mom. I'm going to prove to her that I'm going to turn out. And I'm like, and then she proceeded to say that Mrs. Smith's son, she goes, and that was right before her son pulled all of the, what do they call that stuff around the swimming pool, like the gooey, the piping, I don't know what you call it,
I don't know the name. I know what you're
where
talking about.
stuff comes together, I can't remember what it's called, but he pulled the whole thing. It was like a local swimming pool, and he
Like
pulled
the
all of the
seal.
stuff.
Like
Yeah,
the
the seal from all around the pool. And this is the kid whose mother was saying that I was a bad mom because I wasn't at the pool. And Maddie says, Dustin pulled everything off the whole swimming pool, and we had to shut down for the afternoon because they had caulking. We had to recaulk the swimming pool.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I'm like, but anyway, Maddie just told me, she goes, I'm going to turn out because I'm not going to let them be right about you. You're not a good mom because you're a
Oh
great
my
mom.
gosh.
Just like,
Well, why don't you tell everybody what Maddie does now?
yeah, Maddie's a lawyer in my office and she wants to work with you. So I connected you because she's sort of looking for a pro bono type project to
Yeah,
do.
but
So she,
how, what a full circle moment though, to really acknowledge that. And you wasn't she just named one of the rising stars in Puget Sound Business Journal? I mean,
yeah, she got a rising
did
star.
not turn
I'll tell you
out,
a funny Maddie
Amanda.
story.
She
Here's
did
another
not
funny
turn
Maddie.
out.
Yeah.
She
She
did
came
not.
home from kindergarten one day and said, hey, Mom, you know my friend Kevin, who's one of her little kindergarten friends? And I said, yeah. And she goes, did you know that his dad is a lawyer? And I said, no, I didn't that. And she goes, well, don't you think that's weird? And I said, well, no. And she says, well, who's ever heard of a man lawyer?
God, that's amazing. Amazing to have that at that age.
I'm
Um,
like, yeah, we have a couple. There's a couple out there. So yeah, I think your kids, here's what I would say about it. Honestly, I think your kids, however you parent them and however your family operates, don't compare yourself to somebody else. Just do the best you can do. Your kids know you love them. You're going to be a different family than every other family. And that's your family. And your kids are going to grow up in that environment and that's going to be their reality. And they know you love them. And if you don't drive on a field trip, I don't think they can. And plus, all the other kids, this is another thing. This is funny, I forgot about this. When my kids were sort of that preteen, kind of 12 years old age, sort of, where they have all their friends. And we literally had slumber parties at our house probably 5 nights a week all summer long.
wow.
And the other mothers, because we would have pizza and parties, and because we were just, because I wasn't a very hovery mom. And all the other mothers would say, well, our kids don't, they want to go to your house and they don't, and I'm trying to have a pumpkin party at our house and they don't want to come. And I'm like, and those mothers were having like cupcakes and we're going to decorate the cupcakes and the kids are like, we don't want to do that. We just want to like watch movies and eat pizza and dance. And I'm like, which they did at our house. So, you have the family that you have. And I think if you try to be too much of a super mom, it kind of might backfire a little bit on your kids because they like a little bit of freedom. And my kids also liked it that I didn't volunteer in school.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
were like, Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Jones, and they're all there like staring at their kids, and we're glad you're not here because kind of we don't want you here. So
Oh my gosh, you have made me feel so much better because it's one of the constant struggles of mother guilt. My kids are still teenagers. Actually, one of them is a tween, a preteen, and one of them is a teenager. And I often feel that guilt, like it's mac and cheese tonight, or is it cup of noodles, or
and it's your family, and that's the way they're
yeah,
growing up, and they love you, and like I
yeah.
told Matt, one time I asked them if I thought I should like work half time and come home when they get home from school. And they looked at me and said, well, what would you do? And I'm like, well, I don't know. We could maybe make cookies or something. And they're like, we're good.
I said that about games recently. I said, we should just play some games, to spend some time. I don't have the time. Every spare minute
You
goes.
don't want to play games either, and they know it.
Yeah, seriously. And I feel bad. Like, I'm not like the other family. So I think the validation is just be who you are and let life follow. And it's difficult when you're in it to really comprehend. But sometimes, I mean, Mel Robbins has a new book called The Let Them Theory. And I am embracing that, just like many other people, is let them. Let other people do whatever they're going to do. I can't do it. I live in mess because I don't have the
I
time.
think I'm the original let them. I've been letting them since 1980. I
I
adopted my
love
kids
it.
in 1986, and I've been letting them ever since. And I'm sure that, you know, I could have done things differently. It turned out great, and we were a close family, and we love each other. And they're in their, I've got grandkids now, and My daughter is like the helicopter mom of the year, and I'm like, you couldn't be any more opposite than me. So it's funny.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, we're going to have to clip only the let them part of it as well to tag Mel Robbins into this. Um, but Amanda, you are such an inspiration. I am going to throw out an idea if it's not there already, that your next book is a memoir of your life because it is so.
You know what? The books I've already written kind of are. They're very autobiographical. Like when I first wrote the first book, I wasn't smart enough to know you're not supposed to write about yourself. So I've got a lawyer who's got two kids who are adopted from Korea. And I'm like, I don't need a memoir. You just have to read those books. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing, but it's
Oh,
true. I think
it's
you
amazing.
go route.
I think there's still a place for a memoir, which is not, behind fiction, so that people can see the real Amanda Dubois and just know that they can be inspired for generations because that's what you bring.
Well, I don't think I got time to write a memoir, but and plus it would be too embarrassing.
No, it won't. It won't. It won't be. Everything you've done. Well, anyway, I'm putting that seed in your head, and then
Thank
5 years later, you'll be like,
That's why I'm gonna start writing a memoir. I'm gonna was Tamina, damn her, she told me that, and but I won't read. That's the fun part. That's what I'm saying for people who are young that are watching this. That's exactly a good example of something that just pops in your head and you don't think about it, and then 5 years later you start doing it, and then you look back and say, "Oh, that's how that happened." It's super fun to be old.
Ed, I am really getting that. And, we have to wrap up, but I want to share this one story. When I wrote my first book, because now I've got several, the first book, nobody tells you how to write a book. You just have an idea and you keep going. And so it makes me laugh when people say, so how did you do it? And, want the 10 steps. There are 10 steps to a book, but the writing part of it, you don't have to wait for anybody to tell you to write a book. You write it. So I had this manuscript that I was, walking around with. I just didn't know what to do with. And I had one of my lawyer friends read it. And where I was just saying that she's taught me how to swim. I've not acknowledged her in my latest book. She said to me, no, this has to be 2 books. And I said, no, I'm just writing this one book with this one idea. And I'm going to change the law with this. 10 years later, I wrote exactly what she suggested. And
See, that's what I'm telling you.
it happens, it's other people can see things that you can't, but you're not necessarily ready. But the universe has its own timing and it will happen. What's smart's going to happen. So one of the best analogies that you have given to us is do the thing with your heart and drop the acorns as you're going. Because when you look back, you are seeing those beautiful trees. What an incredible analogy you just gave us. So thank you for that imagery. I hope people walk away with that as inspiration to do the best job they can in whatever moment they're in to let the
Really
rest.
all you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. If people want to find you, how do they do that?
Hope I'm everywhere. AmandaDubois.com probably, or go to your local bookstore and look for one of my books, or DuBois Levias Law Group, where we have the most amazing, it's all women, almost all women law firm.
Mhm.
And we've been celebrating 30 years. So there you go. If you need a divorce, hopefully you don't, but you'll either know somebody who does, or your sister will, or someone. And so we'll be happy to help you with that.
Are you okay with people connecting on LinkedIn?
Sure. I'm not very good at checking LinkedIn of it. Honestly, I'm working really hard on doing better on social media.
Well, you have a YouTube channel too. Can you say that? I mentioned it before. It is, what's the show?
It's
Ripple Haven.
called Ripple Haven, but I don't think that's the name of it. I think I don't know that I've got people do that. So I think it's Amanda, it might be Amanda Dubois 206, but that might be my,
Well, they
uh,
can just Google you and find you. Well, listeners and viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. I could keep talking to Amanda all day long, and I'm sure you could listen to us all day long. I might have to bring back Amanda for a part 2 at some point in the near future. So watch the space. Please get her book, amandadubois.com. Is it .com? And
It's Amanda at amandadubois.com. amandadubois.com. That's it. Yeah.
.com and find her book. She's actually got 3 books. I actually have 2 in my hands. I'm just going to make sure people see it. There's the Complication. This is the first one. This was a record-breaking bestseller, and this one is coming out. And there's a second one. I couldn't find that handy, but get them. I'm actually going to send these books to somebody very close to me for their birthday very soon, and I'll tell you what they say. Well, Amanda, thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. Cannot wait to see what else you do, and I'm grateful to call you a friend.
Oh, this was super fun. I didn't know we were going to get into parenting advice. That's the fun part about a podcast.
Totally.
Tamina Talks is brought to you by Watson Immigration Law. Founded in 2009, Watson Immigration Law is one of Seattle's premier immigration firms, specializing in business and investment visas, but offering a wide range of immigration services. If you need assistance with your immigration needs, Watson Immigration Law is ready to help. Just call 206-292-5237 to schedule an appointment. Mention this podcast to receive a 10% discount off your initial consultation fee.